In the first lesson, we learned that tissue injury causes the symptoms of colds and flu. These injuries take time to heal. In this video, I explain how I was able to find a cure. My search began when I was a university student. While attending BYU, I shared a house with 7 other students. To support myself, I took on-campus jobs that connected me with other students. One year I was a yearbook photographer. Another year I was a game center attendant. I attended parties, guest lectures, and on-campus church services. Needless to say, my student life was a petri dish for viral contagion. Whenever a cold or flu went around, I caught it. During the icy winter months, I would scarcely recover from one before I caught another. To get through the day, I took aspirin and nasal decongestants. I took cough suppressants to get through the night, and I rarely skipped class or missed a day of work. Nevertheless, colds and flu took a toll on my body. I was less able to enjoy student life and focus on my studies. As a student engineer, I knew that problems have solutions. The year was 1982. This was decades before online search engines. Back then, the best place to research a topic was at a library. My campus library curated over 6 million items. It hosted an IBM mainframe computer that had a massive search index of articles and publications. The question on my mind, how can I stop catching colds? At the library, I logged on to a research terminal. I pulled up a list of studies. One seemed useful. The research question, can an intervention prevent the spread of winter colds at a children's ski camp? Now, at the time of this study, winter colds in children were thought to be beneficial. It was said that a child exposed to colds early in life would develop a stronger immune system, so it was normal for kids to arrive at camp with flu-like illnesses. There were no quarantines. About this study. It involved 279 attendees at 5- and 7-day ski camps. Children would live, eat, ski, and socialize in common areas. Infections would spread easily. Here's how the study worked. Upon arrival, a camp doctor filled out a symptoms questionnaire for each child. Children with cold or flu symptoms were excluded from the study. However, they would attend all camp activities. Children without symptoms were randomly assigned to one of 2 groups. One group would receive the active treatment. The other group would receive the placebo treatment. At breakfast, each child received one of the 2 treatments. At dinner, a camp doctor interviewed each child to complete a cold symptoms questionnaire. At the end of the camp, children sampled both treatments. None could distinguish between the 2. Neither the camp doctor nor the children knew which was active. And the outcome of this study? The active treatment group had 2/3 fewer cold and flu symptoms. Now, this study followed a randomized placebo-controlled design. It was said to be the gold standard for medical research, so I had good reason to believe that the effects were real. But the question remained, how do I apply these findings? As I reflected on this study, a thought occurred to me. Some children included in the study arrived at camp with pre-symptomatic infections. Others would soon become infected. In either case, treatment altered the early course of infection. The treatment protocol used a simple dietary product that was easy to buy. So, I adjusted the dose size for my adult body, and I began to experiment. At first, treatments had almost no effect. In the ski camp study, treatments were given before the onset of symptoms. It occurred to me that I was applying them too late, so I began to pay attention. I began to notice subtle changes in my body that preceded illness, and this led me to detect and treat my infections earlier. When I treated them early, I had fewer symptoms. As you learned in the first lesson, many different viruses cause cold and flu-like illnesses. The differences between viruses alter both the early signs and the course of each infection. These differences contribute to the virulence of infection. Over time, I learned to adapt my interventions in response to these, and my ability to prevent sickness steadily improved. After years of practice, I was able to cure every cold and flu. Recently, I came across 2 follow-up studies. First study involved 463 adults who attended 10-day vocational retreats. In this study, the participants applied a sequence of treatments during the early stage of infection. When compared with the control group, the active treatment group reduced their cold and flu symptoms by 85%. The second study involved 1,444 Korean soldiers. It followed a randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind design. Participants received treatments early before the onset of illness. Those who got the active treatment had 80% fewer cold and flu symptoms. Now, we might suppose that the majority of medical and surgical treatments we receive today have been empirically proven, but this is not the case. A recent article in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology reports that high-quality evidence supports only 1 out of 10 healthcare treatments. In general, only drugs subject to FDA approval must undergo randomized placebo-controlled trials. Pharmaceutical companies call these clinical trials because only clinicians are licensed to prescribe drugs. Given the burden of winter colds and flu, why were there so few follow-up studies? First, the conditions of the study were not easy to duplicate. Second, the study intervened early before the onset of clinical symptoms. As timing is crucial, those infected could not be treated in clinics. Third, the study was done in Switzerland. It was published in a German-language medical journal, Acta Helvetica Medica. Although this study was mentioned in the Journal of the American Medical Association, it got 0 insightful reviews. This may explain why no follow-up studies were undertaken in the US, Canada, or the UK. Medicine is both a clinical practice and an institution. Historically, the practice of medicine sought to relieve the disabling symptoms of disease. However, the discovery of ways to prevent disease is often accidental or personal. For example, inoculation against smallpox was observed 1,000 years ago in China. However, centuries passed before someone made a smallpox vaccine. In summary, the cure for colds and flu is an applied science. My quest to find a cure began with a search for evidence. I found an empirical study that addressed a relevant research question. I evaluated the study design and conclusions. Then I set out to adapt and apply the study findings. Over the years, I adapted my methods to suit my body and to address the virulence of each infection. And I adapted my methods in response to new pathogens like COVID-19. With practice, I found reliable protocols that work. The cure for colds and flu is non-obvious. To begin with, this cure contradicts conventional wisdom, and it defies decades of dogma. Each year, billions are spent on marginally effective products. And each year, millions of people suffer the burden of so-called respiratory disease. With each passing year, the science that points to the cure grows. Yet evidence pointed to this cure in the early 1960s. Evidence alone does not produce change. This is because we filter evidence through the lens of our pre-existing ideas, beliefs, and models. To see the possibilities for a cure, we need fresh perspectives. Armed with these fresh concepts and ideas, we begin to make sense of observations and experiences. With the know-how you gain in this course, along with practice, you will learn to cure your cold and flu-like illnesses without drugs. Here's the most important thing you need to know. The cure for colds and flu is a skill that you can learn, like riding a bike or driving a car. As you set out to learn it, you may stumble, but if you persist, you will ultimately succeed. In the next lesson, we take a fresh look at respiratory infections.